I think we will, now that it's about 5 minutes after, we're going to get going with the webinar. I want to first let you know that we had a lot of support from very valuable partners in putting this report together, this guide. We work with these partners on a daily basis, and they are among the best in their business. They are not the only ones working on these issues, but the National League of Cities and Local Government Commission have deep experience in mitigation, resilience, and engagement work, the three big topics we want to cover today. USDN are among the best in the business at doing climate solutions, as are the folks at Institute for Sustainable Communities, based in Vermont, but they do national work as well. We are starting to work quite a bit with a regional group called the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative in the Greater Chicago and the Great Lakes area. And we also are very happy to have gotten the support with from our folks, our friends at Climate Resolve in Los Angeles, who are running our program there, Path to Positive LA, as well as Utah Clean Energy, which is running our program in Utah, statewide, Path to Positive to Utah, Path to Positive Utah. And just so you know who's in the room today, I'm Dan Barry. I'm the Director of Path to Positive Communities here at ecoAmerica. And I'm joined by Bob Perkowitz, our founder and the president of ecoAmerica. Again, thanks to the partners and to everyone else who contributed to this report. We think it's a valuable resource and we hope you will get a lot out of it. We have a number of reasons for having provided, having written this guide, the Moving Forward Guide. Mostly what we hope to do is continue to advance climate solutions in smaller communities, communities that may not have a vibrant sustainability program or even a sustainability director. We've got tons of resources in our community around resilience and around mitigation and engagement that can help these leaders begin to solve climate issues in their own community. Many of them are already making good progress, but we really need to go deeper and faster on climate solutions. That's the purpose of the Moving Forward Guide, to elevate all of our work to find solutions as quickly as we can and to help build resilience in communities and strengthen them. We need everybody to be involved in these solutions, from mitigation to resilience, and that's the third component of this guide that really adds a lot of additional content that we hope people will be able to use. The outline of the webinar today follows, the agenda follows the outline of the guide itself, which is here on this page. We start with what you need to know and what you need to do to talk about climate on the local level and to spur action. We talk about at ecoAmerica the three legs of the stool when it comes to climate solutions. Mitigation, we have to cut the pollution that's causing these problems. Resilience is becoming increasingly important as communities face impacts every single day. But none of that work is really going to benefit the community as a whole unless we engage everybody involved, everybody in the community in planning and implementing these solutions. And the last part of the webinar today, we want to talk a little bit about how this guide can work for you as a local leader, whether you're an elected leader or not an elected leader, how you can bring these solutions home to your community and begin to engage people around you. I'm going to hand it over now to Bob. Bob Perkowitz is our president and the founder of ecoAmerica.
Thank you, Dan, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining the call. Many of you know ecoAmerica. We've been around for 10 years right now, the first 5 years working in higher ed, the last 5 years extending into other sectors. And what we specialize in is institutional leadership. We help other organizations do climate programs. The vast majority of our programs, the American Public Health Association, the Methodist Church, all these organizations have climate programs. We don't necessarily have our name on them, but we're behind a lot of them. And what we do is we help people build their programs from scratch. And so we've got large leadership circles in each of our sectors to help guide the programs. We set up partners. We do a lot of research and communications guides and polling. And then we build the programs, have summits and forums to share them with other people. The other two, Dan's program, Path to Positive Communities, is one of three big programs. The other two larger programs that we operate now are Blessed Tomorrow, which helps faith-based organizations, and there's a bunch of logos of people there where we have contracts with them to do their climate program, and then the same thing in health. And the common thing between communities, faith, and health is that they touch every community in America in multiple ways. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do, is reach Americans who often get scant or misleading information on climate change and help them understand how it's relevant and know what to do about it. I'm going to talk about the superficial kind of stuff up at front, and I use that term lightly here. The guide is for the 19,000 plus communities in America that really don't have climate programs. And the people that are in those communities that are going to engage in climate things have some top line context things that they need to know about, like the topics here, the justice issues related to climate change, the political issues related to climate change. If you look on page 4 and 5 of the guide, you'll see discussions of each of these things, and they're kind of written in a way that if you're talking to your community in a city hall, or if you're a mayor, you can kind of just lift the paragraphs out of there and put them in your speech. But basically, what this says is that, you know, if we're going to solve climate change and if we're going to engage people, it's going to be through communities and through local leadership, which is you. Each of us can make a big difference here on climate change, and all you have to do is act. Solutions are the way to go. They are nonpartisan. Everybody is for clean air, clean water, healthy communities for their children. They have a lot of benefits. They increase health in your community. They increase property values and livability. So what you need to know is that climate change is not a separate standalone issue. Climate and sustainability, every community is already doing a bunch of it. They might not call it yet that, but to the extent that they address it more, they will help solve the problem and create benefits for their community. The second top line thing is just an overview of what you need to do. And it's a similar spread on page 6 and 7 of the guide that lists a variety of things that we have learned in our 3-4 years right now of doing programs for communities. One of the most important things, and this listed here, the first one, make a visible commitment. You can do it administratively in the background, but if you really want to be successful and get the benefits, you've got to make a declaration or a statement and be out there in front of the problem. And all these other things are listed on those pages 6 and 7. I wanted to just touch on 2 of the things here. One of them is embedding the solutions. A lot of people think they have to create a whole separate organization, initiative, whatever. A lot of communities are siloed. There's all the various departments and they work together to a certain amount, but they don't work together. And so what you need to do is a plan to address climate change really is integrative for a community, and it takes advantage of the existing city or town organizational departments and each of them have a role to play in solutions. So you can engage everybody in your city government by embedding it into the various departments. And then the second thing I want to talk about is this point, second to the last from the bottom, on recycling savings. You know, the easy first stuff that you do to address climate change saves you money. It reduces your waste, it reduces your utility bills, it saves you money. And a lot of people take that money and they put it off to the side and they say, okay, let's do that. But then the next step, which might not cost much money at all, which might have to do with things like insulation and HVAC systems, if you take the money that you have saved and you apply it to that, you'll end up keep getting more savings and you'll get a lot more momentum out of your program. So don't look at it as step 1 has to pay for it, step 2, step 3, say that the whole program has to pay for itself and you'll get a lot further. So the what you need to do thing again is top line on action for communities. Dan and I are just going to both make comments on LA. We have been working for almost 4 years in Los Angeles with the Path to Positives community program. And it's a great example of a community being successfully engaged in climate change. They've got a couple hundred leaders that have signed up to be ambassadors. They are putting quarterly webinars together, monthly newsletters. They're having major events like Climate Day LA the last couple of years, which has gotten almost 1,000 people to come out for a full day. Full participation from the government. Mayor Garcetti comes, and it really helps support the White Roofs program, all the different kinds of things that they're doing to make LA a sustainable city. If you look at Path to Positive Los Angeles and Path to Positive LA websites, you'll get a great example of how these programs work and guidance for you when you do your own.
Yeah, we've really enjoyed working in Los Angeles. It's a big, complex city. We could have chosen an easier place to work, but LA provides a lot of opportunities. LA's been on the trajectory moving up towards climate solutions in terms of mitigation and in terms of preparation and resilience. And what we wanted to do there is really elevate that progress, but also bring additional leaders into the conversation to get a broader and deeper engagement throughout the community. Again, using sector leaders in local government, health care and public health, as well as higher education and faith. The leaders that have signed on to PDP-LA have all signed a declaration, which essentially commits them to visible leadership. It commits them to participating in the program and recruiting other folks to join the program. And that's what's generated the success that we've had there. As Bob said, we've had a number of citywide events that have attracted dozens of co-sponsors and supporters, as well as thousands of local residents and participants. So it's one of the real models, and it's something that shows that the mitigation, resilience, and engagement perspective can really work well for a community. So we've mentioned the three legs of the stool a couple of times, and again, mitigation is really the place that most climate activists and local leaders have started, and there are a number of reasons for that. We do have to cut the pollution that is causing climate change, and while we do that, we can clean the air, and we can save money, and we can provide other benefits for our community. So the first leg of the climate solution stool really always has to be climate mitigation, cutting pollution. It's difficult, though, for some communities. Our larger cities and towns are making good progress. They have the resources to adopt formal plans. And there are some stumbling blocks and bars to action that this guide is really meant to try to work around and to work through. So for instance, is it necessary to have a baseline inventory in order to get started on climate change? No, it's really not. Any household will look at their utility bills and try to figure out how to save money. A community can do that as well. So we really advise local leaders to not let that be a stumbling block. Get started and start ramping up the action that you're probably already doing. And there are things that most communities have already attempted to do in order to save money, in order to provide a more efficient government. Good government really does mean climate action in a strange way without necessarily calling it climate action. The biggest step is to reduce energy. Energy use, electricity use, and fossil fuel use. It's expensive and it's polluting. It's polluting our communities and it's polluting communities around us. So when you get started on mitigation, looking at energy and looking at cutting energy use and adopting renewable energy as your goal is a really important first step. By going after buildings and transportation, we can get to the large percent of the costs, but also the pollution that we need to cut. And so we're really pushing, like a lot of others, for communities and businesses and households to adopt a 100% clean energy goal. In the next 10 years, the next 12, 15 years, however long it takes to do it, that, as well as energy efficiency and cutting waste, is going to be among the most important things we can do. We know from the inventories that exist out there and from modeling that building energy use is the biggest opportunity to save energy and also to purchase green energy, especially electricity. And as we electrify transportation and offer transportation alternatives through density and active transportation and transit, we'll get to the large bulk of this problem. It's a little more difficult for smaller communities sometimes, but there are opportunities to improve our transportation system, and many within the building energy use sector. Whenever we cut waste and adopt green purchasing, we're also making contributions to greening the economy and also reducing waste and excess. The important thing, though, is that it can't just be a small portion of the business of government. We really advise local governments to embed these solutions across all of the relevant institutions and agencies. Embed the solutions, embed the call to action for climate mitigation across government, and then reinvest those savings. As Bob said, when you can save money and reinvest it in further solutions, that's a great way to continue to work. The other thing is, oftentimes climate plans forget that nature is among our most important allies. We know that tree canopies save energy and improve communities. We know that stormwater can be controlled, and we can cut energy on that front by using nature. And nature, having a green and prosperous community and neighborhood increases livability and sustainability on a lot of other fronts. Here are some of the resources that we've provided in the guide. Again, the PDF guide that we invite you to download provides links to each of these resources. We have done quite a bit of work with National League of Cities recently. They have reach into virtually every community in this country, and they have a great program called the Sustainable Cities Institute. We're doing a lot of work directly with them to reach into smaller and mid-sized communities, the sorts of communities that we hope will benefit from this guide. And we work with a lot of the other organizations that have provided resources that we list on this page. That's only a small number of the resources that are available, but we hope that they'll really serve a good purpose in getting people started in communities investigating how they can begin to cut their energy use and mitigate climate pollution. The next thing we want to talk about is resilience. There's absolutely no doubt that climate impacts are being felt in communities in every region of this country and globally. The risks are real, the impacts are manifest, and they're only accelerating. Again, the call to action to cut our pollution is a way to also begin to develop resilience. But because the impacts are here now, we have to think about what to do in our individual communities, our individual neighborhoods, and in our own homes and businesses to prepare for the impacts that we are beginning to experience. They're familiar to all of us by now. Increasing heat. I talked at the top of the hour about a heat wave that we're about to experience here in DC. We're not alone. This heat wave is going to impact this entire country this week, they tell us. So we have to be prepared for that. We're dealing with a lot more water, not only sea level rise, but through severe storms that are dumping a lot more water when they do hit. Counter that with the fact that a lot of our regions in this country are experiencing drought. So these are the big phenomenon that are happening, and these are the sorts of things that are causing specific impacts that are being felt by people and communities. We're seeing property impacts, we're seeing health and economic impacts to people, and infrastructure is failing. So there are some real systematic problems that we have to begin to address through resilience measures. And that's going to take some work. When you consider planning and taking action on climate impacts and exposure, you got to assess your community. Every community has a different risk profile and will suffer different impacts. And also the impacted community itself is going to be different. Look at the options and priorities that make sense for your community. But among the most important things to do is to work collaboratively. You need stakeholders and institutions involved, and you really need to get into the work of working with local residents. And that's the important point that we really want to emphasize in this guide. Make resilience about the people in your community. They're the ones who are suffering the brunt of this. We have already discussed how this is a social justice issue, and these climate impacts we know are impacting poor communities, dislocated communities, and vulnerable communities at a disproportionate rate. So you've got to include everybody in understanding the risks, but also in preparing for cutting risks and reducing exposure. And I also want to underline again, use nature. Natural resources that exist in our communities right now can help us beat the heat. The tree canopy, again, I mean, more and more communities are struggling to plant trees and keep them healthy because they control stormwater, they cut the heat, and they clean the air. And they're beautiful to look at. So don't forget about the natural sorts of tools that are available that come at a lesser cost oftentimes, are more resilient than the infrastructure sorts of fixes that we see in a lot of communities. And they surround us right now. The guide also has a section on resilience resources. Believe it or not, the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit is still available to us to use. It's a very, very deep and excellent tool that gives communities the framework to assess their risk, specific steps to take to plan and prepare communities, and a lot of tools that are connected to that kind of work. CAKE is another great resource. They have a climate resilience toolkit that they've put together. Again, walks you through the specific steps that you and the folks in your community can take to address climate risk. Also on this page, the LGC in California, their Alliance for Regional Collaboratives for Climate Adaptation is something that is working across the state of California, and is something that can be applied to really any community anywhere. So now we get to the final and significant portion of the Moving Forward guide, and the work that we really emphasize at ecoAmerica through our partnerships. We bring a lot of research and capacity to our partnerships and to partners to help them integrate engagement into the work they're doing. Policies and programs need people. We need to engage communities in order for these solutions in cutting climate pollution and in preparing communities to really have the impact that they're intended to have, community-wide, and not just be stuck in a silo where they're not getting the broad reach that they really deserve and need. We have a case statement for engagement. Public participation is all about developing policies through a process that apply to everybody in the community. From the design to the implementation, it's all about participation. The deeper you go with engagement, the better result you'll get. And the graphic on the bottom shows a continuum. A lot of times in local government or in other forms of leadership, we inform people about what we're doing rather than consult with them or involve them. What we advocate is that the more you can move beyond simple involvement and begin to empower institutional leaders and residents in a collaborative engagement process, the more you'll empower them. And empowerment is important again because climate solutions, just like good engagement, are a process, and we have to continue to work on them together over time. It's not simply about the outcome. It's not about publishing a plan or reaching the end of a fiscal cycle. It's about the process, and it's about keeping it going and growing it over time. So I often say that good engagement, like good climate solutions, are a journey, not a destination. And empowerment and collaboration are the ways that we really continue to keep people involved in the work we're doing in local government, in institutions, and as citizens. We mentioned a program that we have done in LA before, but I also wanted to point to a couple of other really good engagement examples that exist out there. The city of Evanston, Illinois, set a goal some time ago to be the most sustainable city in America. And one of the things that they realized they needed to do was get buy-in across their local government. And they began something about 4 or 5 years ago that they call the Livability Academy. And at first it got a lot of pushback, but today every single government employee for the city of Evanston, and it's several hundred people who work for the city, participate in an annual livability seminar and training program that talks about the goals and the tools and the reason for livability, which includes sustainability, which includes energy savings and climate work. And what it's done is created an ambassadors program within Evanston, where every single employee, from the city manager to the folks who direct traffic, understand what livability means and why it's important to the city of Evanston. That way, they all can share that with their friends and family and colleagues, and really share a lot of pride in that goal. In the National League of Cities, I've mentioned a little bit about the Sustainable Cities Institute. That's a growing program at NLC that works on a number of different issues. But right now, one of the big programs they're doing through the SCI is a resilience program, where they're working with 7 to 10 communities over the course of a year to help them build their climate resilience program locally. And these are communities across the country of all different shapes and sizes in virtually every region. But the work that they're doing there that I find particularly valuable is they're insisting and they're building into the program from the very beginning the engagement facet. So rather than strictly provide technical assistance around resilience policies and programs, they're saying right up front, engage people, engage the community. And that's an important facet. That's something that I think is really helpful for those communities and something we're really proud to be involved with. And last but not least, our program in Utah, Path to Positive Utah. We started calling it Path to Positive Salt Lake City, but our partners there at Utah Clean Energy and SLC Green, the sustainability program in Salt Lake City, quickly convinced us that there's a big appetite for climate solutions and sustainability across the entire state. We've got about 1.5 years into that program. And as you can imagine, it's very different from the work we do in LA. The leadership there is much more conservative. Utah is not known as a progressive state when it comes to climate solutions, but things are changing. You might have noticed Mayor Jackie Biskupski. She's the current mayor of Salt Lake City, and she is continuing the fine work of the folks in Salt Lake City to commit to 100% green energy, to embed climate solutions in local government, and to continue to push the idea beyond Salt Lake City. The initial launch for our program was in November with about 40 local leaders, business leaders, real estate leaders, major corporate leaders, as well as faith leaders and local government leaders were a part of the initial launch of Path to Positive Utah. And the most gratifying thing was recently when the governor of Utah signed a proclamation, a resolution that was offered through the state legislature, acknowledging climate change as an issue that deserves more study, more action, and more attention by people and leaders in the state. That's something that's quite a development for the state of Utah, and something that our partners in Salt Lake City and across Utah should be very proud of, as are we. So how do you do community engagement? This is one area where I'm just going to have to rattle these things off one by one. We've thought a lot about it. We've done a lot of research here at ecoAmerica. We've learned a lot through partnerships. And this is really how we think it needs to be done. The framework starts with making a commitment. We've asked our leaders to do that in LA and in Utah, as well as in the leadership circles that support my program, Path to Positive Communities, the Climate for Health program, and Blessed Tomorrow. Each of the dozens of leaders have said, we are going to increase our visible leadership on climate change. Leadership comes from the top. Once the trusted leader says it's okay, take action, talk about climate, be concerned, it then follows that the membership or the congregants or the customers or the patients will also feel empowered. Engaging government is something that we've already talked about a little bit. If we make it the business of government to solve climate and prepare communities and engage people, then the work gets done more efficiently and more effectively. Again, Evanston has proven this very, very clearly with the great success and the popularity, frankly, at this point of their academy. Let's not forget about utilities, number 3. We have to demand cleaner sources of energy. There's no way to solve this problem on the mitigation front unless we cut fossil fuels out of our power mix. And it's becoming cheaper and becoming more available. We've still got a long way to go. Customer demand is going to drive this. So we want to make sure that that we empower utilities as well to be a part of the solution. Recruiting community leaders, we've talked quite a bit about that, and there's a lot of information we have in a lot of our guides, including moving forward, about how trusted leaders in sectors across communities will help resonate the goals of local government, and the overall goal of cleaner, more resilient, and healthier communities. Not only their leadership, but using your own media access through your social media channels, but also traditional media to tell success stories. There are a lot of bad news stories out there, and they need to be told. But for every bad news story that we know about, let's try to tell 3 good news stories. The solutions that we're putting in place are very positive and beneficial. We should be telling those stories at every opportunity that we can. We don't need to talk too much more about engaging residents. I've already mentioned that without people, these policies and programs won't prosper. We really have to get into every neighborhood, every community, especially vulnerable communities that are being impacted, and show them how solutions are helping them. What are the benefits that provide healthy, clean, and economically vibrant solutions to people in your community? Show them the easy solutions that they can do. And don't just show them the solutions, show them the solutions that you've already adopted yourself. How have you changed the way you do work? And how can they employ these solutions in their own day-to-day lives, in their homes, in the way they get around town? If they take the first few steps, it's easier to ask them to do more. So engaging residents through trusted leaders and involving them in every step of the way is the way to build a social movement, a social community-based movement around climate solutions in your own community. But it's not just about your community. There's a saying that there's nothing succeeds like success. And one thing that we found is, I hear this from local leaders all the time, they love to copy each other's ideas. And I think that's fabulous. This is an issue where, as we've said before, every day you can make concrete choices to solve the issue of climate change by using energy differently and by cutting waste, for instance. When you achieve success in your community, tell everybody in your community, but also share that with folks in your region. There are national, regional councils of government that are collaborating and combining resources and sharing information to make regional impacts. But impacts, solutions that you've applied in your community could very well work in another community. So go beyond your borders, shout about your successes, and build energy and progress on that as well. Just like the previous 2 sections, we have a ton of engagement resources that we've included in the guide. These are linked as well. We've learned a lot from the Institute for Sustainable Communities and continue to work with them. But we also have links here for our programs that we run, Blessed Tomorrow and Climate for Health, bringing the health voice and bringing faith voices into this conversation are, they're really making a dramatic impact in communities, again, providing additional support and justification for local action. Ask leaders to join your effort. Ask local elected leaders to involve other sector leaders, and engagement will build. That's how we build movements. So I want to hand it over now. Bob has some, having led this effort for, gosh, I guess a decade now, and the last 5 years intensively, has some good ideas on how you can use the Moving Forward Guide to move forward.
Well, I think there's a lot of other resources too, Dan, and but I do think that the first thing to do is download and take a look at the Moving Forward Guide. We will be updating it. We appreciate all your comments and input on that. But if you're going to get comfortable implementing a program, that means getting comfortable talking about it. And there's a variety of different guides, both process guides and content guides, on how to talk to various components of your community. So there's a fairly thick thing that we produced with Columbia University called Connecting on Climate, which has process how you answer objections, how you explain climate change in ways people will understand. And then we have content things where we do focus groups and dial tests and surveys and see what phrases words and statements work best. What are the best arguments? So if you go to the ecoAmerica website, you'll see there's a series of Let's Talk guides for, in general, a big one for national issues, and then there's 4 others for communities, faith, health, and Latinx groups of people. And then, as I said earlier, if you go to Path to Positive Los Angeles and Path to Positive Utah, you'll see those programs in action. The media, the webinars, everything that you need. And then I would also suggest that everybody, if you want to take advantage of it, we provide all these resources open source, and invite you to go to the ecoAmerica website and the Path to Positive Communities website and sign up for the newsletters on both of those sites. There's only one a month. We won't flood you, but it's a nice list of all the resources and things that we produce. And then, of course, the most important thing is to get started. We are more than glad to speak with and help anybody that's interested in doing a community program. So don't hesitate to send Dan at ecoamerica.org or Bob at ecoamerica.org an email. And with that, I think with pretty good timing, what we're going to do is we're going to switch to and open up all the microphones.
Members or their community, we're certainly happy to do that work as well. So at this point, I think the microphones are all open. I know that we did get at least 1 or 2 questions chatted, but why don't we first see if there's anybody who wants to chime in and ask any questions, or I know a couple of our friends from Utah are with us. If they have any perspective they want to add, that's also something we'd love to use the last 15 minutes of this call to just sort of open it up. Mark, do we have a question on the chat that we can go to?
Well, we started out this thing with 32 people, and there's still 32 people here at the end. So you must all like at least some of what you've heard. And not hearing anyone here, I think almost that we might have a technological issue because mostly city people get to where they are by talking to other people, and they're fairly type A. So not sure what's going on.
Yeah, if there's another feature in the control panel on the right of your screen where you can raise your hand. So if for some reason our muting system is muting everyone right now, Mark can unmute you and if you raise your hand. There, I see there was one question around the concept of 100% clean, and I think it's a good question because there are communities, and Bob knows a lot more about this, but I think one of the things that we're trying to explore, and it's not just us, a lot of organizations that are working on climate solutions are promoting the idea of fossil-free fuels of power. What if your community doesn't have that option? What can you do? Bob, in the event that a community, a local utility does not yet offer because they do in DC, I signed up for green energy years ago. What if you live someplace where you can't make that switch right away? What do you suggest? What's the best approach for somebody?
Well, I think that the best example is Salt Lake City, which is going from 100% coal-fired electricity to 100% clean energy in 15 years. They started at the end of 2017. By 2032, you should not be able to buy any electricity in the greater Salt Lake City area that comes from burning things. And so what they have done is that they've done just a great job of reaching out to the utilities and establishing partnerships and establishing plans. They are blessed with a lot of sun and there's a lot of thought that they're going to overbuild the capacity for solar there and export to other states and communities around them. But a first step is always to go and talk to the utility and see what they can do to help. If you can still, even if your city or your utility does not provide electricity, you can make your own, and you can buy renewable energy credits from a variety of different sources that will offset those emissions. We are into offsets, but the main thing that you want to do is conserve, buy renewable energy, either make it or buy it, and then offset what you can. And you can do that as an individual, as an organization like a business or a hospital, and you can do that as a community. And some of the guides that you mentioned into the mitigation have a lot of steps and ideas on how to do that. And as you said, Dan, at the beginning, it varies by community, and you really have to look at it yourself.
I think we've got our technical issue solved. If anybody has a question they want to chime in on their microphone, feel free to do that now. Otherwise, we have one in the chat box here that I can get to. All right, I'll go to the chat. Jacob asks, how do you encourage municipalities to build trust with the community? Which is an excellent question, and it's really the entire point of doing a well-planned campaign-style engagement effort that has as its goal that very purpose. Local elected leaders are much better trusted, frankly, than national leaders at this point. We've done a lot of research that shows that. So as a local council member or mayor, you already have a little bit more trust with your community. And part of the reason for that is that as a local elected leader, you interact with the community itself on a regular basis. You intimately know everything that's going on there, the people that are working there, that live there, the sorts of impacts and opportunities that there are. But an important part of building trust within the community is to reach the trusted tribal leaders within your community. Every community has a bunch of religious congregations, or business leaders, or leaders in higher education. There are folks who work in emergency services. There are a lot of people who are concerned with and beginning to work on climate impacts and cutting climate pollution, who are also trusted leaders within the community. Forging relationships with them isn't simply a matter of inviting them to an event or getting them on your mailing list. It's about having a conversation with those trusted leaders. It's about deeply exploring their values, their concerns, and also what their hopes are, and where they see opportunities from the sorts of climate solutions that a local community is advancing. It is true that there are going to be costs. There are going to be impacts that we can't avoid. But what we hope local municipal and elected leaders will do is begin to forge those relationships with trusted leaders that emphasize the benefits that eventually that will be present immediately and grow over time. So that's, I think, the shorthand answer to that. It's all about engagement. The more you engage, the more you sit down and share concerns and opportunities with trusted leaders and the people that they represent, either officially or unofficially, the deeper you'll be able to get into the community. And that's really the foundation for building trust. Bob, do you have anything to add to that? You're the expert on this.
Well, I would just say that that's the purpose of our guides. You know, you have to, like, we talk about the justice issues, we talk about children, we talk about health, we talk about thriving nature, and then the process and stuff in the 15 steps guide, the communicating on climate guide, connecting on climate guide, and then the specific guides for each of them will let people know that you're really listening and you understand and you care about it from their perspective. And that's what you've got to do. It's always about people, it's about them, it's about solutions. And if you stay away from the partisan stuff and the negativity, you can build trust.
I have another question chatted in here. The question is this: can you talk a bit about how to start a sustainability or resilience office in a local jurisdiction? There are so many different climate projects that I think a central place for coordination is needed, but getting an office of sustainability or resilience is not easy. Yeah, Angela, good point. That's especially in a smaller community, that's a major challenge. What, in my experience, I've seen is that in a lot of local jurisdictions, if the city council or the mayor decides that climate or sustainability or energy are important issues, they don't necessarily have to begin an entirely separate new project. In a lot of communities, the city manager is the person who's responsible. Kind of makes sense. They're the business manager of the local government. And so it's in their interest to figure out ways to reduce energy costs, which consequently we know means you're saving energy ideally and reducing your mitigation, your impact on climate pollution. The other element to that, I think, is if you don't have the resources to hire a staff member and assign them to forming a sustainability office, locate a staff member in affected agencies that should be the point person. So a committed local leader, a mayor or council member, could say, okay, in the Department of Transportation, I want you to consider impacts to infrastructure and how we can solve them. In the facilities department and the buildings department, I want you to figure out how to cut energy and reduce impacts in our buildings. In the Office of Aging, I want you to consider how we can protect older people in this community who have impacted health that's exacerbated by climate impacts. So there are staff members in local governments who can adopt this work. It means shuffling some things around, but frankly, increasingly local governments are seeing the importance of getting more folks across local government to pitch in, to coordinate, and then reach out to the community to bring these solutions and prepare their communities. There are also so many resources out there that provide local elected leaders and their staff with the tools and the resources, the language, and the framework for climate mitigation strategies and climate resilience strategies. So you don't have to make it up. There's a proven track record in many, many communities of solving these and making progress. So again, learn from what other folks have done in order to get as efficient the progress as you can out of the staff that you already have if you cannot establish a new office.
I just wanted to add the one concept that came up a couple times during the presentation of embedding. You know, as Dan said, you might not have a separate department, you might not have a separate sustainability person, but you have somebody that's doing the planning. It might be a city manager, it might be an assistant manager, there might be a deputy mayor, depends upon the community, but somebody is coordinating planning in your city, and that person, as they develop and coordinate the plan, as they write out the document of how they're going to do it and the 3 or 4 priorities, put sustainability in that. And then as they go out and talk to each of the departments, make sure each of the departments do it.
And the other element to that question that I think bears further emphasis is it shouldn't just be up to local government, because local government oftentimes is taxed. Literally, they don't have the money and resources to do a lot of work that needs to be done. We've learned from our friends in the greater Chicago area at the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus that in that region, and this may be true in other communities, there are citizen councils that are being formed to address the tree canopy or litter prevention, or in this case, reducing energy use or building resiliency. So there's a lot of work that local governments and local leaders can get out of concerned residents and civic leaders in the community. So in a community that's smaller and doesn't have its own sustainability office, yeah, why shouldn't the local residents take the lead in sort of assessing the problem, identifying solutions that could be put in place, and empower the local leader to take action, do some of the homework for them. That's what they do in the Chicago area, and apparently local elected leaders rely on it very, very deeply because it extends the power of government by having that sort of a collaborative relationship with empowered and motivated local residents and leaders. That's another way to do that. Do we have any other questions on the line? Because I think we've got them all. We've cleared out all the chat questions that we had. Anyone else? Well, The last slide you're looking at is the thank you slide. We want to thank you all for participating. We want to encourage you to share this guide as much as you can with folks that you work with. Again, we'd like to extend our thanks to our colleagues in Los Angeles and in Utah, from whom we've learned a tremendous amount. The partners who supported this guide with their time, with their resources, and with the work that they've done historically. They've established tremendously valuable programs that are helping in communities around the country. And personally, I want to thank Bob, and I want to thank the staff here at ecoAmerica, Jennifer and Mark and Caitlin, who put the guide together. It was a lot of work. We're very proud of it, and we hope that you'll find great use from it.
And thank you, Dan.
Well, thanks, me too. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. Stay cool, and we'll hopefully be back in touch with you very soon.